Buenos días, soy William Franke. Me describo como un filósofo de las humanidades, un pensador teológico, negativo teológico y literario. Soy profesor de literatura comparada en la Universidad de Vanderbilt. He sido profesor de filosofía en la Universidad de Macao, Fulbright Cátedra distinguida en teología intercultural en la Universidad de Salzburgo y más recientemente profesor residente en el Centro de Estudios de Renacimiento Italiano de la Universidad de Harvard en Florencia. Mi filosofía apofática está concebida y expuesta en libros, el primero, Sobre lo que no se puede decir, 2007, y Una filosofía de lo indecible, 2014. Se amplía hacia una filosofía comparativa de la cultura en Caminos apofáticos de Europa a China, Regiones sin fronteras, 2018, y se aplica para abordar controversias actuales en educación y sociedad que van desde la política de identidad hasta la ciencia cognitiva y los estudios de medios, media studies, sobre la universalidad de lo que no es, and the universality of what is not. El giro apofático en el pensamiento crítico, 2020. Mi libro más reciente, Pandemias y Apocalipsis en la literatura mundial, la esperanza de la salvación planetaria, y el próximo, Identidades sociales y justicia social, reconcebir la ética y la política en la era del Wokeismo de este mismo año, emplean esta filosofía apofática para iluminar cuestiones de gran relevancia pública. Doy conferencias y dirijo seminarios sobre mis ideas en inglés, francés, alemán, italiano, no en español, en 4 continentes.
Perfecto, profesor.
Okay, thank you.
Primera cuestión, se habló y escribió mucho de que la pandemia nos cambiaría como personas. ¿Cree de verdad que ocurrió algún cambio?
Well, I think it's accelerated the changes that were already underway towards an ever more technologized, technocratic kind of society, right? We were all really thrown back onto the internet during that period. And of course there are risks that this dehumanizes us in so many ways. The machine becomes absolutely dominant, and in certain ways that means the eclipse of religion, of a religious dimension, although I want to give a much more differentiated and nuanced response to that question of the fate of religion, which I think
¿Cuál es el
is...
futuro de la religión en el mundo de la inteligencia artificial?
All right, well, obviously artificial intelligence is an incomparable instrument. Its power is really never before been seen. Its power to render us all robots, and it's certainly prima facie, there's a kind of an apocalypse of religion, and really the demise of religion as relation to the other, which to my mind is really the essence of religion, to the holy other, holy in 2 senses, right? Completely, and also then the sacred. Are we going to lose this dimension of the holy other with the continual advance here of it's our whole techno-scientific culture that is now being manifest in this unparalleled form of power with AI. Now, as I say, I don't want to take a one-sided view of this. In some ways, there's an opportunity to divinize ourselves, and with all the risks, of course, to divinize oneself, that is really anathema considered in religious terms, and that is the agenda for some of the proponents of artificial intelligence. We might think of Sam Harris and the horsemen, the atheist horsemen. They really do see the demise of religion. They declare the end of religion is ushering in a golden age of greater possibilities for human flourishing. Religion is negative in their lexicon. And I don't want to see that as being all wrong, because there are all different sorts of religion. So much religion is idolatrous. It doesn't really open us to this dimension of the holy other. It becomes a way of enclosing oneself within one's own community or even tribe, but where you exclude the other, rather than the opening to the other, which is the essence of religion. The symbols, the concepts, the rites of religion can become foci of self-enclosure. And that's when religion flips over into the opposite and betrays its own original inspiration. And this happens all the time. Religious revelation in its founding moments, Moses, Jesus, Mohammed, is revolutionary. And it opens the world and it opens people to one another. But the revolution, in almost every case, it turns into the opposite, and some kind of a dogmatic, closed system that oppresses and persecutes those who are outside. So it becomes a system of exclusion from being this moment of opening, universal opening. This is really the essence of religion, and it's the infinite openness of all of us to one another, which is the ethical imperative that we face today as in every age. And this can go with religion. I think we need religion to instruct us, to inspire us, but religion can become the system of oppression that we see in so many ways. So I want to say that I don't want to polarize secularization and religion. The Christian religion secularized the Western world because God came into the world and he redeemed the world. That's what has distinguished the West, and that's why we have modernization really coming from the West with all its power. The blessings of religion can be communicated through secularization. I don't want to oppose that. Christianity does secularize. It's been the motor of modern Western civilization, and the liberationist movements, liberation of women, liberation of every minority, every group, every identity group.
Sí, eso nos lleva a la última cuestión para grabar en vídeo. Muchos ven y tiene que ver con su última investigación, muchos ven en la elección de Donald Trump una derrota del wokeismo. ¿Lo ve así? ¿Qué viene ahora en el futuro de esas personas? ¿Nuevos agravios fundamentales?
Right. This is really the moment, isn't it? This week, with the inauguration of Trump as president. Again, and
the confrontation with the Bishop of Washington yesterday.
Yes, this is a tremendous challenge for us. I have to admit, Trump does and says the opposite of what I was just saying in so many ways. So, this openness to the other. But I want to resist the impulse to oppose him. I think that there's another way of responding, and he's going to be Trump. I think I don't want to be against everything just because Trump is doing it. He may have some good effects. I was actually hoping from even before the election that he could have a good effect on the war in Ukraine and elsewhere. I think maybe a point that I should make is when I articulate my philosophy, which I call apophatic thinking, from the basis of what we cannot grasp and know and articulate, and being open to that dimension of otherness, I don't want to exclude the opposite. And if Trump is talking the language of, America first and strength, I don't want to actually oppose that. When you oppose, then you stiffen the resistance. I would like to let it dissolve when it finds that it doesn't actually have an adversary that it can erect itself against. And I think as well that I need my opponent as my nemesis. My philosophy is not right in and of itself. It's only a relation to others. And I'm not going to insist on my way of thinking. I want to really be in dialogue. So I think that there are some good things that can come about. It depends on how people are motivated. And I don't want to condemn them because they are in the opposite camp, because they don't agree with me. Quite the opposite. I was thinking, I believe in the weakness of God as being stronger than the strength of men, right? 1 Corinthians. And Trump wants to preach strength. So I think I would like to let human strength implode by not resisting it, and that is the manifestation then. I think that's the way of accessing the strength of God, which is, or the weakness, right? The weakness of God that we can incarnate. And I think that is really, it's my way of trying to address this assertion of strength. Now, the fact that Trump does that over and against the other imperial powers in our world, notably China, I think, I'm not going to stand up and oppose China. I'm going to try to make China reflect on its own apophatic traditions, Tao Te Ching, and the rest. But I think that has to work. My strategy has to work in tandem with other strategies, and to make the Chinese president take a more dialogical approach. He too, however, is trying to embody a multipolar approach, and I do think, however, that pressuring from different angles is important. I don't think everybody should convert to the religion of apophaticism. No, it's a voice that has a contribution to make in this very complex play. And so, Trump, his approach has its place. I think. I hope it doesn't end up excluding its others. Mm-hmm. And he does seem to be open to dialogue with what we often think of as the enemy here, these civilizations with which we're in conflict.
Okay, I need to return to the question of the pandemic, because today, with human relationships have suffered with pandemic. We don't talk in person. Today we use WhatsApp. We don't want to talk with the people, including by phone. What impact does this relationship deficit in the humans?
Right. Well, I think the way you phrase the question does, it expresses the anxieties that we have about losing direct human contact when everything turns to the internet. And I share those concerns, but I would like to also appreciate the possibilities for interconnectivity that have exploded. That, in some ways, I think there are grounds for optimism, even the kind of optimism that is being expressed at this turning point in.
But Professor, today is more important the global village for the people than the human being that is in his side.
Right. Well, that is the fear that we all share, is the eclipse of the human being. But the technology in itself does offer us opportunities for expanding our human connectedness. The fact that I'm here now and that we're talking, I'm not even sure exactly. But my connections with the colleagues in Spain and all over the world, in China and elsewhere, these are tremendous opportunities. I have a very different view of China because I speak almost every day with my Chinese translator, actually, or interpreter who teaches me Chinese. And if I just listen to the news, I don't have anything like the understanding of how Chinese are thinking.
You have written a book about the search for the absolute in Don Quixote, where you maintain that existentialism was a thought especially favorable to certain attitudes of the Spanish temperament. How would you define that temperament?
Well, maybe a key word would be pasión. Yeah, and the Don Quixote has been analyzed by Spanish philosophers, notably Miguel de Unamuno, Jose Ortega, and both of them actually, they take Don Quixote to be the symbol of Spain. They really work their philosophies around this figure. He represents will, a kind of absolute will for Unamuno to live forever, actually. Ortega sees it as actually will rather than intelligence. The forte of the Spanish character is this voluntad. And Ortega would like to then combine that with a greater degree of lucid intelligence. Both of them are existential philosophers, thinking from the grounds of existence, the truth that they seek and embrace as philosophers is rooted in existence. And Don Quixote does embody all of this as well. So I think the answer is there's an indomitable will for the infinite that is manifest in Don Quixote, and that turns out to be characteristic for the Spanish character, the soul of the Spanish people, Don Quixote being the Bible of the Spanish people, emblematically fighting with the windmills, right? Not really understanding that they're windmills, thinking that they are giants and a menace. This could also be the emblem of the Industrial Revolution, incipient in early modern Spain, that there's maybe an intelligence deeply submerged in this crazy act on the part of Don Quixote.
It's important for me this question. What part of Quixote do you prefer, the first or the second?
Well, obviously they go very much together, but my book is very explicitly about the second part,
Okay.
where the operations of self-reflection are redoubled and intensified. And this is really the essence of modernity, self-reflexivity. And it is really on display, especially in part two. I think Cervantes didn't really know what he was doing as he started in part one. It was a funny story. It was hilarious to see what happened to this man. The philosophical depth grew on Cervantes as he wrote, and by part two, he had a much deeper grasp of what he was doing and what was happening with Don Quixote, really, in his relationship with Sancho, because actually Sancho becomes the messianic figure as the novel progresses. But the articulation into the two parts is absolutely crucial.
Okay. You're a student of apophatic theology or negative theology, which is a way of speaking about God for what he is not. What is the relationship of this form of knowledge with the true?
Right. Yeah. And you say with the truth. Of course, there are well, do we want to say, well, there are many truths? Actually, I do want to. I don't want to dismiss the truth. One might say you can't speak about the truth, but I do think that we are all as human beings sharing one world, right? There's no planet B.
Yes.
We are by force of circumstances all in relation to a common ground, right? Literally our earth. And I think that does really make the truth, that is a truth that is for all of us, imperative. However, we have to admit that this truth is going to be perceived and apprehended differently by every different culture, ultimately by every different individual. And it's going to be an existential truth, right? What anyone is able to see and embrace as the truth depends on what they are living. So we all understand it in a different manner, but we are aiming at, can I say something that's the same? Maybe it's nothing that's the same. It's like this God of negative theology. Whatever name or label or concept you pin on it, God is wrong, or it's inadequate in any case. So in a way, it's a space of nothing. But see, any way of talking about it, I don't want to say it's nothing either. No, it's everything. And where this really comes to matter is in our relations with one another, that we aspire to harmonize. We aspire to cooperate with one another in enhancing life for all. To that extent, we're recognizing some kind of a common truth that gives us all life. It's the aspiration towards unity, I think, that gives truth some kind of unicity for us. So, no, truth is absolutely fundamental in my view. Of course, many are talking about the post-truth age, and we see where that comes from. Truth is no longer a simple correspondence to the facts, and which facts, construed by whom. Even classically in philosophy, of course, you have different theories of truth as coherence or truth as correspondence to the facts. And ultimately, truth is it's a moral, ethical, and a religious question as well. There is, the idea that truth it can be defined scientifically in isolation from the moral dimension and the religious dimension of human being, I think it proves to be somewhat illusory. But science became idolatrous by claiming the truth for itself. Truth is this openness in which we experience one another and reality itself beyond our construals of it within whatever conceptual system.
It is possible to live in peace in a society without sharing not a true but the same narrative?
Well, okay. Is it a society, or are we talking here about a network of many societies? And sure, there are different groupings within humanity with different paradigms, different cultures. But I would suggest that all of these paradigms, and let's take China and the West, or Christianity. I think that whatever paradigm we're dealing with, and we could take, and even a secular paradigm, they all have to recognize their own limits and then open to some kind of relationship to what is beyond their own paradigm and the common truth as it's defined within any given culture. And I think the resources are there in every culture. I mentioned China, Taoism. This is a religion that is very much about negating its own certainties. I find this is what I call the apophatic, right? And I find it in the mysticism of our Western religion, Western Christianity. Juan de la Cruz, Teresa de Avila are great monuments of this kind of apophatic thinking. This in the mystical line of an openness to the transcendence of an unknowable God, la noche oscura. So a culture, as you suggest, a society, all right, it has to have some sort of a common ground for agreement, for unifying people. But I think every culture has to have this critical consciousness, a self-critical consciousness that enables it to recognize the limits of its own discourse, its own paradigm, in order to be open to the other, to learn from the other as well, rather than saying, and I think that Christianity is true. I think that Buddhism is true for those who are practicing it, but that truth is not exclusive of the other truths of others, and even of a great other, which this dimension of the divine that many religions recognize as God, but many other cultures that are in some ways religions, secular religions, don't recognize. But that's a matter of language and of the cultural choices that we make. I think that we simply have to appeal it to our common interest as human beings in understanding one another and working together for common flourishing.
Why did wokeism triumph in your country, in the universities?
Yeah. Well, a lot of reasons, and some of them are out of weakness and the need for feeling oneself to be justified, a kind of self-righteousness.